Okay, so today we'll talk about three architects. We'll begin with GIO Ponti, a very important Italian architect, born in 1891, and he died in 1979. So this is the gentleman. This was the gentleman, not just an architect, but also a designer and an important cultural presence, not just in Italy, but internationally. So Giovanni Gio Ponti, born on the 18th of November, 1891, and today it is the 18th of November, but 2021, was an Italian architect, industrial designer, furniture designer, artist, teacher, writer, and publisher. During his career, which spanned 6 decades, Ponti built more than 100 buildings in Italy and in the rest of the world. He designed a considerable number of decorative art and design objects, as well as furniture. Thanks to the magazine Domus, which he founded in 1928 and directed almost all his life, and thanks to his active participation in exhibitions such as the Milan Triennale, he was also an enthusiastic advocate of an Italian-style art of living and a major player in the renewal of Italian design after the Second World War. His most famous works are the Pirelli Tower, built from 1956 to 1960 in Milan in collaboration with the engineer Pierluigi Nervi, the Villa Planchar in Planchar, I guess, the pronunciation, in Caracas in Venezuela, and the Superleggera chair produced by Cassina in 1957. Well, this is a very sketchy description. He did much more than this. This is a picture of the man as a young man, or younger man, maybe not too young. Anyway, I will show his works at the beginning, but for a good part of the presentation, through the lens of this photographer, architectural photographer, Marco Introini. Unfortunately, I got, it was comfortable to discover the buildings of GIO Ponti through the lens of this photographer, and I didn't search for other sources. I should have. So now you'll have to look at his work in black and white photographs, well taken, but somehow after a while I myself got tired, but I had no time to add some color photographs except for his last works. Anyway, we'll look at his work through the lens of this photographer, Marco Introini. And this is the photographer. Sometimes Italians sport long beard and short hair. Anyway, a good photographer. And by the way, if you are interested in Italian architecture, he has a website or a blog where he has many entries, many very important Italian architects whose work he photographed extensively. Marco Introini. So we begin with Casa di Via Randaccio in Milano, 1924-1936. We wouldn't describe it as being highly modern. It's a very early work by GIO Ponti, but he built when he was a young man. So GIO Ponti, Milano. Now GIO Ponti and Emilio Lancia residential building in Piazza Amendola in Milano, 1928-1930. Let's recall Le Corbusier built Villa Savoie in 1928. But this is a large apartment building. This one in the corner. I like GIO Ponti because he's increasing. You'll see he will become increasingly modern, but his modernism has a touch of contextualism. It is hybrid. You might even call it impure, but that's actually a quality, in my opinion. Of course, from this building and the Pirelli Tower is a long distance. Now, Torre Branca in Milano, again, 1932, 1933. Tall it is. I don't know who the engineer was here. In the case of the Pirelli Tower, it was Pierluigi Nervi. Anyway, now we're beginning to see that the older structures near the tower that GIO Ponti built are, almost, they look almost made by Claude Nicolas Ledoux, of whom we'll talk a little bit later. GIO Ponti, Antonio Fornaroli, Eugenio Soncini, Casa Mormonti in Milano, 1933-1934. You see already the simplification of the architectural language. It's already a modern block of flats. It almost looks like a building built after the war, not before the war, the Second World War. Now, again, GIO Ponti, Emilio Lancia, the residential building on Torre Rasini in also in Milano, 1933, 1934. So you see very quickly, in just a few years, he's getting rid of any historicism. And I mean, it's enough to compare this building with his building, and you see that it's already, you just cross the street and you see something else, very different. Okay, another building, Montecatini building, 1936, 1938. I think is this one. Here we are already, moderns with together with GIO Ponti, and and the war didn't even start, although it's very close to start, unfortunately. But still, despite the modernity, you still see certain things which are with some difficulty, describable in terms of modernity. I mean, there is a certain modernity, but there is also a sense, and this is common in the work of GIO Ponti. His work has a certain complexity, even formal complexity. There is a difference also between these floors and the floors at the top. So, there are certain so-called complications which add some charm to the building. Okay, another, or is the same, is number 2, is in the same area, also by him. Now we arrive at one of his most famous work, Grattacielo or Cielo Pirelli, the Pirelli Tower, which he built together with Pierluigi Nervi. You see the name here. Pierluigi Nervi, a remarkable engineer who was also an architect. In other words, his engineering had aesthetical virtues. Pierluigi Nervi is also the initiator of a publishing effort, which was remarkable. The history of world architecture. I have it. It's in 18 volumes, and it's a beautiful work. It was published also in English, and a very important publishing work. Tracing the history of architecture from the so-called primitive architecture to modernity. strangely, perhaps it was run by or made possible, or I don't know. It is his work, together with many scholars and critics and architects. But he was the director of the whole project. And this is the Pirelli Tower, very elegant. It's very close to the railway station, the pharaonic railway station in Milan. Truly, in fact, the biggest railway station in Europe. I mean, at least until some years ago. But this work is very, very elegant, and I'm sure its elegance derives also from the collaboration between GIO Ponti and Nervi, Pierluigi Nervi. Look at this, it's already art. I mean, this is the difference between architecture and just building. This is just a building, and this is architecture. And it is architecture because, if I am to express myself in exalted terms, the building sings. Unfortunately, I could have chosen, at least for this building, some other photographs. I like artistic photography, and the photographer is good, but so much grayness after a while tires me off. Anyway, San Luca Evangelista Church, after the war, 1955, 1961. Interesting church, actually. We are not very familiar, or I am not so familiar with this kind of church architecture, but it has, he was a modern architect by now, but you can see there is ornamentation here with a cross indeed, but abstracted. And the building is not offensively modern or modernistic. It has a hybridity, which I think offers it complexity which must be appreciated. So from mid-century, 1955, 1960. Residential building, also by him, from 1956, 1957, an urban insertion. Okay, Casa Melandri in Milano, 1956, 1957. Again, we can see that the architecture of GIO Ponti is not dogmatic. He's not trying to impose on a context, the purity of a certain style. He's negotiating. He's a good negotiator between the buildings nearby, and you might say his architecture is not very spectacular. It is not. But maybe under certain conditions, this is actually a quality. He obviously built a lot in Milan. Another building, Asso Lombarda office building. It also has to be known and said that after the war, Italy, was less than, affluent. The war had a strong impact, not just on Italy, of course, but now we talk about Italy. So there were many buildings that were built, rather quickly, and perhaps not with the biggest budgets. but the building does have dignity, and you know, it stands the test of time. Another residential building from 1961, this one in Monza. Um, Unfortunately, yeah. Uh, I apologize for so much grayness. I should next time introduce some color pictures or you know, different vision, photographic vision, because here we are now kind of trapped in the vision of this particular photographer and his choice of what to photograph. The Politecnico in Milano, 1961. Very interesting also, you know. I would say that GIO Ponti was an architect who negotiated rather skillfully between what we call tradition and what we call innovation. You know, these are not, you know, extravagant buildings, but they have clearly architectural intentions which show an open mind, and I think it's interesting. This university campus for an important university in Milan and in Europe in general, I think these buildings are interesting. And look at the windows, you know, I mean, who would do such windows? Okay, we could expect something like this, you know, today, but not this kind of small windows of various dispositions, you know, vertical, horizontal, you know, just like sprinkles on the facade. This is certainly not a dogmatic modernity. He didn't need too many windows here because obviously it was here, it is here an auditorium. But all in all, I think it's a surprising architecture for you know, an educational building in general. GIO Ponti in Milan. And you see, he has small deviations from, like, you know, here. He employs this sort of thing very often. You know, there are certain subtle differences that he introduces. Otherwise, you would say his architecture is very, you know, kind of plain, but not really. If you look more carefully, you discover interesting, you know, deforming acts, and these exceptions create dynamic, although subtle, dynamic, you know, effects on the building. Even the windows, you see, they have these, some of them, you know, you could say they are a little bit graphic, and they are, but they animate the facade a little more. Now, again, for the Politecnico in Milano, a different kind of building. Here is kind of a mixture between the Pirelli Tower and what we just saw previously. But the courage to employ small windows, even for a, you know, a rather large public building, this is indeed courage, because you know, conventional modernity wouldn't employ such windows, like, you know, look here. And this creates a particular architectural aesthetics. Another building in Milano. This man built half, probably half of Milan. Even this building is kind of interesting because there is a certain playfulness, but discreet, and you are not sure exactly about when this building was built. It could have been built before the war. It was built after the war. It's almost anonymous, and this is a quality to have an architect of his stature create an architecture which is not screaming a signature or a name that is his name. Look at the side elevation also. It's hybrid, and rather charming because of this. Also notice that this is not a straight line. So it's a little bit curved, in accordance with the street. This also creates a very gentle, delicate organism. You see it here at the top. Also, vertical windows, not horizontal, the canonical horizontal window of modernity. No, here he uses vertical windows, and not just here. Okay, Chiesa, another church, but this one in San Francisco from 1961 to 1964. Also a very interesting work, in my opinion. I mean, no one can contest, the complexity, the lyricism, the graphic qualities, the representational, attributes of this building, and abstracted certain references, to the, either pictorial triptychs or Gothic, the Gothic in a way. I mean, you see here this artwork, and then you see the entrance into the building. They connect. He was an architect able to connect, I would say. This building is moderately modern, and I would say that his architecture is like this, moderately modern, with just a few exceptions or few touches of more of an adventurous kind of architecture. But most of his work is moderately, but exactly because of its moderation, he becomes somehow radical. It depends how you look at it. Again, small windows sprinkled on the facade, and details like this one, which connects with the entrance. Unusual window here now. This triangle symbolizes quite explicitly the aspiration for the above, which the church should have. Even the structural elements, I'm thinking now of the sculpture by Auguste Rodin, the cathedral. It's almost like you have two arms or two hands that reach for each other and meet here at the top. It's a modern interior, but it could have been understood in other centuries before very easily. And I like this facade also. The idea of a door within a door is an interesting one, and kind of symbolizes correctly the relationship between the human and the divinity. So this is the the opening for man, and this is the opening for God. And you almost have the feeling that if you contemplate the entrance into this building, of God protecting man, the human being. And so there is an intimate entrance, but within a larger, more monumental, but also protecting entrance. It's a good entrance into a religious building. Now, a residential building in Voghera, 1961, 1964, you see again that GIO Ponti is not afraid to, here and there create differences. Otherwise, the building is, again, moderately modern. A residential building also around that time, very different from the previous one, is this one. And again, I would notice, his contextualism and his ability to create kind of hybrid aesthetics. You have here, small windows, then you have larger, frames here. You have a betrayed grid somehow. This is interrupted, so that he's accommodating various constraints or influences on the building. Also Milan, truly, GIO Ponti built half of Milan, if not more. It's a fine tower, it really is. And you have here, some references perhaps to castle, which you wouldn't expect in a modern building, to a certain medieval architecture just there at the top. Otherwise, the building is quite, it's a modern building through and through. And the back is also interesting, or the long facade. Again, this is sophisticated architecture. And I like the way, this is how I express myself, he sprinkles the facade with the windows, which are different from this, but it's a different facade, it's a different condition. And also the fact that he breaks the, a more conventional architect would have continued to express the structure of the building all the way to the top. No, he doesn't. He shows some of it, then he interrupts it. Also here, creates interesting things. Now, the Denver Museum of Art, he built also in the United States. In Denver, there is also a museum, maybe it's by part of the same, and I imagine it is, by Daniel Lipskind, but this is by GIO Ponti. And finally, a color picture. I like the way, well, kind of emphatically, he curves the wall with this big opening in order to see the landscape of Denver. But again, the facades of his building are, fortress-like, but made lyrical through gentle gestures of opening up through small windows of various sizes and various forms. So yes, it is in a way a fortress, but I would call it oxymoronically a gentle fortress. Usually fortresses are far from being gentle, but this one is gentle. He was a sophisticated designer, an architect, and look at the texture also of the wall. GIO Ponti in Denver, Colorado, in the United States. The building by Daniel Lipskind, also a museum of contemporary art in Denver, is more flamboyantly, audacious, but I don't know. I don't know if there is more complexity in the work of Daniel Lipskin than in the work of GIO Ponti, who, with more moderate means, creates a richness which I'm not sure can be easily observed in the other building that I mentioned. So we are now in the United States, in Denver, and here is this him? Maybe yes, maybe not, I don't know. But is that opening into the world in order to admire the distant mountains near Denver. Actually, this is the building by Daniel Lipskin, right here. And this is the building by GIO Ponti. So they are very close to each other, GIO Ponti and Daniel Lipskin. And here you have a building by Michael Graves. Okay, in Tehran, a villa, a large building, very interesting. Look at the plan. Now, this is a modern architect who knew something about the labyrinth and even hesitations, even doubts, perhaps. I find these plans very interesting, you know, and there are very subtle things going on here. You know, even the pavement around the building and also in the courtyard. Of course, it's Tehran with a certain, you know, in Iran with a certain culture and a certain climate. Anyway, this is a model. And now we look at some of the pictures. Interesting building. The interior opulently modern, but not arrogantly. So I wish I had better pictures, but maybe for the next presentation I could search for more. But nevertheless, we see here a subtle architect who you know is able to with through small differences to give life to the building. You see how unconventional he is actually in the way he creates these penetrations into the world. Perhaps Frank Lloyd Wright was correct that architecture is easy, or there would be any problem to do architecture if there were no windows. The windows, indeed, you have to have a dexterity, an ability to place them you know, properly, and he is doing it, but with a lot of, you know, I would say poetical license, you know, all kinds of windows, and he's creating harmony with diverse elements. You look here also, you know, most architects would have done a straight line here. No, but here you see also the base here of the building is, this fragmentation creates richness. And I'm sure this was done intentionally by him. And look at the courtyard. Very interesting work, because he includes also, you know, ceramic tiles, you know, artworks on the facade of the building, in the courtyard, in the interior, which creates intimacy and also an art-like ornamentation, which is, I would say, conducive to promote, scale down aesthetics, proper for, or properly for a family life, for a villa, for a house. It's not a public building, although rather large, but it confuses you because you think here there are many floors. We saw clearly that this is not a tall building, you see, but through these small things, the perception of the space is as if it is very, very tall. Now, another villa in Caracas in Venezuela with the same kind of plan, which I like very much. I like these plans, different from Hans Scharoun, the German architect. But there is some, again, almost an uncomfortable modernity, not so much perhaps in the elevations, but in the plan. Also, it's interesting, how he accesses, this area with the entrance of the house. I imagine the large glass part of this portion of the building, but the stair is very intimate and a little bit curved and narrow. And again, he plays with the opposites and with the conjunction of opposites. Slanted walls a little bit, in the plan, and there is a richness and a particular sense of aesthetics, which make, I think, his architectural work engaging. Look here, so all kinds of, analysis of, how one would see certain things from certain parts of the rooms or of the space. So he offers surprises. It's a good strategy, actually, when you work on the plan of the building, to imagine, various views from within the building, but also from without, that offer surprises, because we all need, surprises. Well, hopefully good surprises. This is a way of channeling the views and the perceptions of the building in certain ways. Maybe from the outside, you wouldn't expect the richness of possibilities, visual possibilities within the building. But I'm sure that once you are in the building, you become aware of them. Because in a way, what all of this adds up to is breaking the box. And look at this, strange corner here, and also here. It is unique. Strange, also here. somehow, and also here. And we also see it in the, you see it here in the elevation. You might say that these are affectations. Well, you know, I'm not sure about that. Look at this wall here. What architect to do something like this? You know, not many. So there is richness, there is complexity. Although the general appearance is of a, you know, modernistic building and so on. The model, and you see some views, and I'm sure that living there is pleasant exactly because spaces communicate through various perspectives and opening up all kinds of relationships. Caracas, Venezuela. Now, a church, an important cathedral, I don't know, I tried kind of in a hurry to learn why it is called the Co-Cathedral, the Great Mother of God Co-Cathedral from 1970 in Italy. And it's an interesting church or cathedral. Could it be that two different denominations are, you know, honored within the building? It's possible. Otherwise, why would it be called a co-cathedral? It's not in a very good shape, at least when these photographs were taken. You know, some certain parts of the building do not seem to be well taken care of. But I hope that since these photographs were taken, things changed. Courageous also chromatically. I mean, look, who placed within a church green tilings, you know, or tiles? Not too many people, I think. Well, he did. Now, I'll show some furniture designs by GIO Ponti. Superleggera chair, which apparently is considered a masterpiece, is highly valued, probably very lightweight, made of fine materials, fine wood. It is very elegant, it's true. And although it seems fragile, it is perhaps very sturdy. But the Italians are great designers. There are other architects who designed beautiful pieces of furniture. This is considered a classic. It is in a way timeless. It is modern, but it could have been done and used, in modern acceptable ways in other centuries, perhaps. A table, a side table, GIO Ponti. And here I found this, kind of, composite, image with him, because many ideas sprang from his head. The magazine Domus and the Pirelli Tower and the chair we just saw and so on, and an exhibition with his works, 1950s, and other chairs. He was able to create the unexpected, exactly when at the point where you might thought that you know now what GIO Ponti is all about, he surprises you, or he surprises anyone. A good architect and a good designer and a good presence on the architectural scene for many years in Italy, in Europe, and in the world.